This is Off the 11th Hour, and I'm your host, Nathaniel Stone, but we all know who the Lord of Hosts is. Say with me in any dialect you so choose. Yahuwah, Sabaoth. Kodesh brothers and sisters, fellow members in the body of Messiah, and those in the world, thank you for giving me your attention in a world full of distractions. We're here at Sukkot. We're a little over halfway through it. That's a little bit depressing as we're thinking about it. I was thinking about it today as I woke up. It's always a sad time to know that this fellowship is only once a year. It's bittersweet, but next year I hope to see you there. Those that are viewing this at home, you haven't been here, and those that have been here before, come on back. I have the website here if you want to go ahead and register for next year. I'm going to put my email up here if anyone needs to get a hold of me. And to those of you in the audience, if you didn't get this before, this is the URL that we have. Today's lesson is on the Sin of Jeroboam. I'd say this is, how many people here, as I look out into the audience, have not heard of Jeroboam or don't know the message? If you just raise your hand, if anyone does not know Jeroboam or the sin of Jeroboam, what exactly precisely that is. Yeah. It's a really important message. I really believe that every Christian today, no matter what denomination you are in, needs to know about the sin of Jeroboam, because it is a 2,900-year problem, approximately 2,900 years. We're still dealing with the fallout nearly 3,000 years later. It's in connection with Solomon that is there. So, I had some video I was going to play beforehand, but I'm gonna for time, because I have a lot of material to go through. So for time, I'm going to just explain essentially the video that I was going to do. The first video was a guy who was painting on docks on a shipyard in, I believe it was Nova Scotia or Norway. Actually, it was in Norway, and the box, the electrical box, is supposed to be painted gray, but he spilled some, and then other areas supposed to be painted yellow. He spilled some yellow paint on the gray box, so he just painted the whole box yellow. And everywhere in Norway, the boxes are supposed to be painted gray, but that particular dock, it's painted yellow. And he said that now here we are, like 30 years later, and they're still painting the box yellow. People don't understand why that mistake happened in the first place. They're just repeating the error and covering up over the error and continuing to paint that box. It's an interesting take of essentially how an error happens, and it just gets repeated over and over, and eventually people don't even know why or how it happened. The second video I was going to share was it's a scientific experiment, a psychological experiment, and it's scientists put a lot of monkeys in a box, in an enclosed box, and they had a ladder with some bananas on top of the ladder. And every time a monkey would try to climb the ladder, the system would spray like jets of cold water on the other monkeys, and then the monkey would get down. And then it got to the point that every time a monkey would try to climb the ladder, the other monkeys would attack the monkey trying to climb the ladder to get the bananas. And then slowly and surely, they would take one of those monkeys out and put a new monkey in, but they didn't spray the water anymore. So now there's no water that's being sprayed, but every time one of the new monkey would try to climb the ladder, the other monkeys would attack him. And slowly and surely, they pulled all the monkeys out one by one, and then there was nothing but the monkeys in the room, and none of them had been sprayed by jets of water. But anytime any one of them tried to climb that ladder, the other monkeys would attack them, meaning that they The reason why that pattern happened in the first place was a negative response conditioning that was there, but eventually it got psychologically instilled that you don't climb the ladder, or if you do, you attack the other monkeys. They were repeating this behavior without even knowing why they did it in the first place, because the original monkeys that got sprayed with the water were removed. So I'm going to connect those psychological points here with the sin of Jeroboam that we have. It's an interesting connection. I'll connect it at the very end that is there. So it's essentially a pattern, and the pattern of it has been a plague in this in the world today that we're dealing with, this 2,900 year plague that we've been dealing with of the sin of Jeroboam, of the pattern of the reason behind it and why it keeps getting replicated. And so the teaching here that I'm going to be going over is, what is the sin of Jeroboam, and how can we climb the ladder to get the bananas and realize that we need to rise above the water getting sprayed on us, or we need to paint that electrical box gray again, not yellow. That needs to happen. So let's get into the pattern that I have here. So we'll turn here to 1 Kings chapter 11. And we're gonna start down. Sorry, my notes here. That's not the notes that I made, but I have it memorized. We'll go through it the best that I can here. Verse 26. And a servant of Shlomo, Solomon, I'm going to switch to ESV maybe for an easier read for some people here. 1 Kings 11:26. Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, an Ephraimite of Zeredah, a servant of Solomon, whose mother's name was Zeruiah, a widow, also lifted up his hand against the king. And this was the reason why he lifted up the hand against the king. Solomon built the Millo and closed up the breach of the city of David his father. The man of Jeroboam was very able. When Solomon saw that the young man was industrious, he gave him charge over all the forced labor of the house of Joseph. And at that time, when Jeroboam went out of Jerusalem, prophet Ahiah the Shilonite found him on the road. Now Ahiah had dressed himself in a new garment, and the two of them were alone in the open country. Then Ahiah laid hold of the new garment that was on him and tore it into 12 pieces. And he said to Jeroboam, take for yourself 10 pieces, for thus said Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, behold, I am about to tear the kingdom from the hand of Solomon and will give you 10 tribes. But he shall have one tribe for the sake of my servant David, and for the sake of Jerusalem, the city that I have chosen out of all the tribes of Israel, because they have forsaken me, worshipped Ashtaroth, the goddess of the Sidonians, Chemosh, the god of Moab, and Milcom, the god of the Ammonites, and they have not walked in my ways, doing what is right in my sight, and keeping my statutes and my rules, as David his father did. Nevertheless, I will not take the whole kingdom out of his hand, but I will make him ruler all the days of his life for the sake of David my servant, whom I chose, who kept my commandments and statutes. But I will give you the kingdom out of his son's hand, and will give it to you 10 tribes. Yet to his son I will give one tribe, that David my servant may always have a lamp before me in Jerusalem, the city where I have chosen to put my name. And I will take you, and you shall reign over all that your soul desires, and you shall be king over Israel. Verse 38, a key verse here. And if you will listen to all that I command you, and will walk in my ways, and do what is right in my eyes, by keeping my statutes and my commandments, as David my servant did, I will be with you, and will build you a sure house as I built for David, and will give Israel to you. And I will afflict the offspring of David because of this, but not forever. Solomon thought therefore to kill Jeroboam, and then he flees into Egypt. So The reason why Jeroboam was given the kingdom was because of false god worship that Solomon brought in, and it was the father who established this to happen. As we see here, this is the prophet Ahiah in verse 29 that found him and was commanded to do this, to Jeroboam, to be a significant event for that. Now, as we're going to see what Jeroboam did with that, I don't want to get into the specifics yet. I want to jump into after he did this sin. So now we see like a good thing. The father is giving him a command of a piece of the kingdom, a pretty large piece of the kingdom, a fifth, right, of the kingdom, and he, well, 5/6 of the kingdom, and it was ordained to happen. But then something happened, and then he essentially falls from grace, and things don't turn out very well to him. So I'm going to cover what he did after I share with you what the father said to him from the reason behind the sin. This is in 1 Kings 14, 1. At that time, Abiah, the son of Jeroboam, fell sick, and Jeroboam said to his wife, "Arise and disguise yourself, that it may be known that you are the wife of Jeroboam, and go to Shiloh. Behold, Ahiah the prophet is there, who said of me that I should be king over this people. Take with you 10 loaves, some cakes, and a jar of honey, and go to him, and he will tell you what shall happen to the child." So it's interesting here that Jeroboam tells his wife, not himself, feels guilty over what had happened. So he sends his wife, and not only does he send his wife, but he sends his wife in a disguised format, and then he tries to bribe him, you could say, by sending food and sweets with him to try to appease the mouth of the prophet so that his son ends up healthy. So we see here in verse 4 that Jeroboam's wife did so. She arose and went to Shiloh and came to the house of Ahiah. Now Ahiah could not see, for his eyes were dim because of his age. And Yahuwah said to Ahiah, "Behold, the wife of Jeroboam is coming to inquire of you concerning her son, for he is sick. Thus shall you say to her." So the prophet couldn't see very well, but he was still given warning over what was about to happen. So there's no getting around, there's no disguising before the eyes of the prophet, even if the physical eyes of the prophet wasn't able to see. So this is what Jeroboam is telling, this is what the prophet is telling Jeroboam's wife to say to Jeroboam here in verse 7. "Go tell Jeroboam, thus says Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, because I exalted you from among the people and made you leader over my people Israel, and tore the kingdom away from the house of David and gave it to you, and yet you have not been like my servant David, who kept my commandments and followed me with all his heart, doing only that which was right in my eyes, but you have done evil above all who were before you, and have gone and made for yourself other gods and metal images, provoking me to anger, and have cast me behind your back. Therefore, behold, I will bring harm upon the house of Jeroboam, and I will cut off from Jeroboam every male, both bond and free in Israel, and will burn up the house of Jeroboam as a man burns dung until it is all gone. Anyone belonging to Jeroboam who dies in the city, the dogs shall eat, and anyone who dies in the open country, the birds of the heavens shall eat, for Yahuwah has spoken it. Arise, therefore, go to your house. When your feet enter the city, the child shall die. It's a pretty serious thing. So we see one in the 3 chapters earlier, the father tells this prophet to give 10 pieces of the kingdom to Jeroboam. And in a quick succession here, now in chapter 14, the father's calling him dung, house of dung, and says some pretty severe things, and is saying that not only him, but his entire bloodline is going to be cut off and destroyed over what he did. So it's a pretty serious. This is a pretty serious transgression that was done. So that's why I wanted to share the punishment first, so that when we look at the sin, it has a heavier impact to us. So in 2 Kings chapter 12, we're going to kind of go over a little bit of the events leading up into it, but not in detail. So I'm going to skip through some of this. We see here that when Rehoboam, Solomon's son, takes power, Rehoboam is in charge, and the 10-tribe kingdom under the command of Jeroboam is saying here in verse 4 that your father made our yoke heavy. Now therefore lighten the hard service of your father and his heavy yoke on us, and we will serve you. So he says, go away 3 days and come back. And so he takes counsel from old men and from young men. The old men tell him essentially to lighten the load, and they will be your servants forever. And the young men said, don't show him any weakness. In fact, bring the hammer down upon them, essentially, is what he says. He says, my pinky is going to be like my father's waist, meaning like what my father did, I'm going to be exponentially worse, is essentially what he says here. Right here in verse 10, my little finger is thicker than my father's thighs, his thighs. So we see here that this event is what caused the division that made Jeroboam rip away from the 12-tribe kingdom and taking control of the 10-tribe kingdom, which was part of the father's will. So this kingdom becomes divided here, as we see in verse 16, and Rehoboam wanted to take control of the 10 tribes through force, but he was told that here in verse 22, the word of Elohim came to Shemaiah, the man of Elohim, say to Rehoboam, the son of Solomon, king of Judah, and to all the house of Judah and Benjamin, and to the rest of the people, thus says Yahuwah, you shall not go up or fight against your relatives, the people of Israel. Every man return to his home, for this thing is from me. So they listened to the word. So everything up until this point is the Father's will that is there. And so there's nothing that has been done wrong. This is all part of the Father's will until here we get now to the sin of Jeroboam. Let me just see here. Why is that not loading here? It's okay. Oh, yeah. Okay, it is right here. Okay, great. Awesome. That makes things a lot simpler. So we have here in verse 25, then Jeroboam built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived there, and he went out from there and built Penuel. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will turn back to the house of David, if this people go up to offer sacrifices in the temple of Elohim, or the temple of Yahuwah at Jerusalem. Then the heart of this people will turn again to their Adonai, Rehoboam, king of Judah, and they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So the king took counsel and made 2 calves of gold, and he said to the people, you have gone up to Jerusalem long enough. Behold your gods, O Israel, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt. He set one in Bethel, and the other he put in Dan. Then this thing became a sin, for the people went as far as Dan to be before one. He also made temples on high places and appointed priests from among all the people who were not of the Levites. And Jeroboam appointed a feast on the 15th day of the 8th month, like the feast that was in Judah, and he offered sacrifices on the altar. So he did in Bethel, sacrificing to the calves that he made. And he placed in Bethel the priests of the high places that he had made, and he went up to the altar that he had made in Bethel on the 15th day in the 8th month, in the month that he had devised from his own heart. And he instituted a feast for the people of Israel and went up to the altar to make offerings. So let's break that down, essentially what it was, this sin that was done. So aside from the fact, you could say that the symptom of the sin was making the golden calves. That's not the root source of the problem that was done. So what is the reason why the golden calves of Jeroboam were made? And it's right here in verse 26 and 27. And Jeroboam said in his heart, now the kingdom will turn back to the house of David if this people go up to offer sacrifices in the temple of Yahuwah at Jerusalem. Now we know in Deuteronomy 16:16 and a few other places that 3 times a year we're supposed to meet and gather in the Mosaic covenant, as it is, and the men are to gather in Jerusalem. So 3 times a year they are to go back to Jerusalem. So what Rehoboam was scared of is that if they go back to Jerusalem and do the religion as it stands, the pattern as it stands, that eventually the 10-tribe kingdom is going to get pulled back together into the 12-tribe kingdom, back to Rehoboam, king of Judah. And then the fear that he had is that they will kill me and return to Rehoboam, king of Judah. So the problem here that I would say is that he didn't have faith. The faith is that, A, he was just a man, and a prophet came to him, ripped some garment into 12 pieces. You know, he had no idea what was happening. He's walking on the way. A prophet comes up to him, rips his garment apart, and gives him 10 pieces of the garment and says that you're going to take control of 10 pieces of the 12-tribe kingdom. And then it happened. So if the father did that to him, then why is he now scared that they're going to kill him as he goes back to the king of Judah? Or what's the problem if they did? Is he gonna? Is he going to? It's the key thing is that he's going to lose power. He's going to lose influence that he wanted for himself. He did not want to forgive his brother. He did not want to love his neighbor as himself. As if the kingdom were to go back together, then there would be some type of a parlay. There would be some type of another council, like what we saw at the beginning of chapter 12 with Rehoboam and Jeroboam talking. And then there would be terms and conditions that are met, and then the kingdom would come back together. If Jeroboam would not have been greedy for power and for gain, and not been scared for his life that they would kill him, and had more faith, we would have a 12-tribe kingdom today, even after what Solomon did. And so I see this pattern of the sin of Jeroboam, and this is a pattern that has been happening for 2,900 years. Is that we see that there is, we can just say the 12-tribe kingdom is an assembly of people. There's an assembly of people, and then there's some type of a legitimate power dynamic that can be there, and whether it is of the Father's will or not, or of our will, regardless of that, there is a division that happens. And then instead of coming back together, the person in which the division happens, let's just say, has control of the 10-tribe kingdom, instead of trying to be a peacemaker and bringing unity within the body as it needs, he continues the division. But then instead of just continuing the division, he changes things to retain power and control. And so this is essentially what he did here, is that he says to go to Jerusalem is too far. I'm going to make 2 golden calves. You can worship here. But Dan was even further to go than to Jerusalem. So that didn't even make sense in that application of the reasoning why he did that. And then in creating the 2 golden calves, which is essentially what we saw at the base of Mount Sinai, which is a corruption of the commandments that were being made, he also corrupted the place of worship, and he also corrupted the people that were doing the sacrifices, the Levitical priesthood. He changed the priesthood. And so in changing the priesthood, he also would change the implements of the law itself and its applications. And then not only did he do that, but he created a new holy day, holiday, in verse 33 that we see here, is that he he did it, well, in verse 32 and verse 33, the 8th month, like the feast that was in Judah. That's this feast here, the 7th month, day 15, Sukkot. He did it just 1 month later on the 8th month, day 15, and changed the holiday system. So we see here that he changed the place, changed the style, changed the people performing the worship, changed the days of worship, and even broke certain commandments of molten images and reverted back to the original sin after Mount Sinai, the golden calf that was there. This application that we have can be seen for the past 2,900 years. It was done in the 10-tribe kingdom, and I see that the 2 golden calves can be represented today by 2 major religious houses or 2 major systems. We also see that similar with the 2-tribe kingdom. When the 2-tribe kingdom went into Babylon, and then the exile ended, as they never fully came out of Babylon, is a common understanding. Those that today in Jerusalem, today's Jerusalem, over there in the Middle East, under Judaism, they would disagree with that point, but I would make the point that their Babylonian Talmud is right there in your face, that they never came out of Babylon. That was there. So you could say that the Babylonian Talmud is, or the religion that came out of that, is another golden calf style situation. So we see of the 10-tribe kingdom this pattern that was set, and then the 2-tribe kingdom followed in that very same pattern. And we've been seeing that all the way from then until today. Let's get an instance here in modern history. The Protestant Reformation in 1533. What the Protestant Reformation was, as much good that was in the Protestant Reformation, the 95 theses that Luther put on the nailed to the church wall in October. A lot of people don't know about the 99 theses that he did a month earlier that he put to the wall, and as much as they definitely were protesting the authority of the Catholic Church, in many ways, what it really seemed to do was the middlemen wanted to become the head. They wanted to replace the Nicolaitan system that was in power, and then put their own system in place that was there. And we see that as the religious wars, as Christianity broke apart from the stranglehold of Roman Catholicism, through the hundreds of years after the Protestant Reformation, a lot of wars were fought over Christianity, and like Oliver Cromwell, and we see a lot of these wars that were done. They were done in a very similar pattern to the Sin of Jeroboam. So I'm going to go through a few spots here leading up into it of the severity of this sin after the Sin of Jeroboam, after Jeroboam did what he did. And I'm going to show you a lot of kings of the 10-tribe kingdom that they continued to walk in this path, some more and some less. So I'm going to show you here in 1 Kings 15:25. This is Nadab, the son of Jeroboam, began to reign over Israel in the 2nd year of Asa, king of Judah, and he reigned over Israel 2 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahuwah, and walked in the way of his father in his sin, which he made Israel to sin. The way of his father, the sin of Jeroboam. So he walked in that sin of Jeroboam, and then we see here in verse 29, as soon as he was king, he killed all the house of Jeroboam, as we saw in chapter 14, that the father said that his whole line is going to be cut off. So the father willed that Jeroboam's line is cut off. So now we have this new king rising to power, and he did that will, but he continued to walk in that. sin of Jeroboam. As it says here that verse 30, it was for the sins of Jeroboam that he sinned, and that he made Israel to sin because of the anger which he provoked Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel. So we notice here that the house of Jeroboam is dead, it's gone. But the sin of Jeroboam remains. Here in verse 33, in the 3rd year of Asa, king of Judah, Baasha, the son of Ahiah, began to reign over all Israel. And then in verse 34, we see that he did what was evil in the sight of Yahuwah and walked in the way of Jeroboam and in the sin which he made Israel to sin. So that the electrical box in Norway on the dock has been painted yellow, and it's still remaining yellow. So a new king comes into power and just put a fresh coat over everything, and he keeps the electrical box yellow. It's supposed to go back to gray. That's what all the other patterns were. So in 1 Kings 16:2, we see here against Baasha, the word of Yahuwah is coming. It says to him, to Yehu, the son of Hanai, against Baasha, since I exalted you out of the dust and made you leader over my people Israel, and you have walked in the way of Jeroboam and have made my people Israel to sin, provoking me to anger with their sins. So he says, behold, I will utterly sweep away Baasha and his house, and I will make your house like the house of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat. So we see here that the sin of Jeroboam, the house of Jeroboam is gone, but the sin remains. He walks in the sin of Jeroboam, and now his house is set to destruction. Later on in the same chapter, in verse 25, we have that Omri did what was evil in the sight of Yahuwah and did more evil than all who were before him, for he walked in all the way of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, and in the sins that he made Israel to sin, provoking Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, to anger by their idols. So we see that he did more than before. He is expounding upon that, but that pattern, the beginning, started, and now it's deviated even further. So we have in verse 30 that Ahab, the son of Omri, as he takes power now, the son of Omri did evil in the sight of Yahuwah more than all who were before him. So the guy before him did more, and now Ahab does more. So it is metastasizing, this sin, you could say, that is being done. And as if it had been a light thing for him to walk in the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, he took for his wife Yazabal, or Jezebel, the daughter of Ethelbaal, king of the Sidonians, and went and served Baal and worshipped him. He erected an altar for Baal in the house of Baal, which he built in Samaria, and Ahab made an Asherah. Ahab did more to provoke Yahuwah, the Elohim of Israel, to anger him than all the kings of Israel who before him. Third one now that did more. And then he, in his days, Jericho was rebuilt, and we know that the curse that was upon Jericho of anyone who rebuilds that city, as you can see in verse 34. So now Ahab is in power. I'm going to turn to 1 Kings 18, 17 and 18, and go from there. When Ahab sees Elijah. Now, if any of you knows what the term gaslighting means, I find that this term is gaslighting, what he says. When Ahab saw Elijah, Ahab said to him, "Is it you, the troubler of Israel?" Right? So that's gaslighting. Ahab is the one that is, or misdirecting or projecting what he is doing onto others. Ahab is saying, "You're the troubler of Israel." Why? Because he's speaking truth? Because he's standing up for paint the box gray and not yellow, for understanding that the psychological event of these evil scientists spraying cold water of a monkey just trying to get a banana that is there. Who's the real problem here? It's Ahab that is the problem. So he's saying to Elijah, "Is it you, the trouble of Israel?" Elijah responds, "I have not troubled Israel, but you have, and your father's house, because you have abandoned the commandments of Yahuwah and followed the Baalim." So then we know that this is the showdown of the 850 prophets, 450 of Baal and 400 of Asherah. Now, we went through some period in time from, we'll call it Solomon's time, until now. There's a number of kings that have been in power, and it hasn't been all too long, maybe a little over 100 years that has happened. And the people, over such a short period in time, were so confused that they didn't know the difference. As we see here in verse 21, everyone should know this verse. Elijah says, "How long will you go limping between two different opinions? If Yahuwah is Elohim, follow him, but if Baal, then follow him." And the people did not answer him a word. Why didn't they answer a word? Because they were scared, or they just didn't. It's because they didn't know. They had doubt. They're like, well, we're his chosen people. We're in the promised land, and these people have been appointed kings. We're outsourcing our understanding. We're outsourcing our power to these people that are in positions of power. It's their job to know, and they are directed and anointed by the Father. I mean, he did bring Jeroboam into power, so they would know better, right? And so they would, if they had our best interest in mind, but they didn't answer a word because there's now a division, and Elijah is pointing this out, and the people didn't answer a word because they were confused. This is a shadow type and picture of Babylon the Great. It's a shadow type and picture of where we are today. You could say here, come out of her, my people. Come out of this confusion. Stop coming out between two different opinions, right? If Christmas is a set apart holiday, then worship it. But if it's not, come out of it. If the commandments are what we're supposed to be doing, then do them. And if not, then do as you're doing. Stop hopping between two opinions. He's telling you what is right and what is wrong. What's part of the message of Elijah is to make the path straight, to make it clear so that you know what is what through the confusion. That's why Elijah comes before the great and awesome day of Yahuwah, to help us to know in that final separate point. So we have here at the end, in verse 39, the end of this showdown. We know the story, or should know the story. It says here, when they see that the sacrifice happens, they say, Yahuwah, he is Elohim. Yahuwah, he is Elohim. So it's clear now to the people. And he says, seize the prophets of Baal, let none of them escape. And then punishment and the separation happens. So the sin of Jeroboam, a lot of the problem that metastasized through Ahab is stopped, but does it stop completely? In 2 Kings chapter 3, verse 1, probably the last piece here, and then we're going to make some connections here of what to do. It says here, in the 18th year of Jehoshaphat, king of Judah, Jehoram, son of Ahab, became king over Israel and Samaria, and he reigned 12 years. And he did what was evil in the sight of Yahuwah, though not like his father and mother, for he had put away, at least, right, the pillar of Baal that his father had made. Nevertheless, he clung to the sin of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he had made Israel to sin. He did not depart from it. What is the original source of the sin? Different priest worship, a different system of worship, different holidays, different location. It's a religious house that is based on Torah, that is twisted into mixed religion that is there. So we have that through all that, through the sin of Jeroboam, this pattern has been replicated. Now, I'm going to share a prophecy. Now, we know that because of this, eventually, the 10-tribe kingdom was taken away by Assyria. It talks about it. Since I'm right here, I'll go there. In 2 Kings chapter 17, verse 6, where it says that he carried the Israelites away to Assyria. Assyria captured Samaria, the 10-tribe kingdom. And then in verse 23, it says here that Yahuwah removed Israel out of his sight, that they were exiled from their own land to Assyria until this day. The sin of Jeroboam led to a divorcing of the 10 tribe kingdom, and it led to a diaspora into the nations until this day. It's a very serious thing, as we see throughout the entire First and Second Kings, Sin of Jeroboam in greater or lesser formats. So now that we recognize that there is a sin of Jeroboam, should we just become complacent over that? Let's read in Amos chapter 6:1, and then we're going to connect about the repair of the breach. Woe to those who are at ease in Zion, and to those who feel secure on the mountain of Samaria, the notable men of the first of the nations, whom the house of Israel comes, pass over to Calneh and see, and go, and from there go to Hamath the Great, and go down to Gaath of the Philistines. Are you better than these kingdoms, or is your territory greater than your territory? O you who put far away in the day of disaster and bring near the seat of violence, woe to those, here it is, who lie on beds of ivory and stretch themselves out on their couches and eat lambs from the flock and calves from the midst of the stall, who sing idle songs to the sound of the harp like David invent for themselves instruments of music, who drink wine in bowls and anoint themselves with the finest oils, but are not grieved over the ruin of Joseph. Therefore they shall now be the first of those who go into exile. The prophet Amos was just before Assyria took away before they took away the 10 tribe kingdom. So what is this here? The ruin of Joseph. It is a breach. The ruin of Joseph, that sin of Jeroboam that caused the division, is what is keeping the 12 tribe kingdoms, two sticks made whole. We all know this in Ezekiel 37, verse 14. But the problem here is that the people that are in the 10 tribe kingdom, before they get carried away, they are lying on beds of ivory. They're stretched out on their couches. They're eating lambs from the flock. They're in comfort. They're at shalom. They're at peace. It doesn't bother them that they are a kingdom divided. They are okay with it. And these people in these positions of power don't have a problem with it because they are in the sin of Jeroboam, and they are retaining their power through control of people by not wanting the kingdom to come back together. They are allowing these boxes, even though they know, a lot of these people, they know his name isn't Jesus, or they know that this is this or that. These people know that, but they don't want to correct a mistake, and they want to continue in the mistake because that mistake keeps them to have power and control over people. And because of that power and control, they are in luxurious comfort. They have no problem of an enemy. They're on these couches and they're eating lambs from the flock. And they are not concerned with that ruin of Joseph. So I'm going to just read the one final piece here, and then I'm going to make some connection before we close off and go into question and answers. We have in Isaiah chapter 58, verse 12. Your ancient ruins shall be rebuilt. You shall raise up the foundations of many generations. You shall be called the repairers of the breach, the restorer of streets to dwell in. If you turn back your foot from the Sabbath, from doing your pleasure on my holy day, and call the Sabbath a delight and the holy day of Yahuwah honorable, if you honor it, not going in your own ways or seeking your own pleasure or talking idly, then you shall take delight in Yahuwah, and I will make you ride on the heights of the earth and will feed you with the heritage of Jacob your father, for the mouth of Yahuwah has spoken. This restorer of the streets to dwell in, this repairer of the breach. So as I close off here, there's so much more of the information that I can share on this. Is what are we doing to counteract the sin of Jeroboam in our daily life? I encourage everyone here to to go out and sow seeds, as we see in Mark 4. I encourage everyone to, if you're new in the walk, make sure that you get at least a really good solid foundation. I'd say at least for 3 years, to really make sure that you've been, as the teaching that I taught a couple days ago with the fruit trees planted in the land. Make sure that you're bearing fruits that are mature. But I encourage you to keep the Shema. To talk about them when we rise up, to talk about them when we lie down, talk about them when we're out in the way, and hear that small, still voice as we're guided to go and talk to that person right there. Don't be scared. Just go talk to them. If you hear it, don't doubt it. If you feel that you need to go talk to someone, go spread seeds into the nations and help to restore the streets to dwell in, to help people to understand that we all split apart, and all of these religious houses of institutions that are continuing to hold power, we need to come back together in one body. The body of the. Finally, I'll say it's come to my mind here. I don't have it in my notes, but it's here now. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 5, he says that it's been reported to him by Chloe, Lashon Hara. No, Chloe let him know that there's a problem. Please help the brothers to get along. Make shalom, be a peacemaker. 1 Corinthians 1:11. Reported to me by the house of Chloe that there is quarreling among you. And then we see that some say, I follow Paul, I follow Apollos, I follow Cephas, I follow Christ. Well, a lot of times people today, well, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, or I'm a Mormon, or I am a Catholic, or I'm a Jew, or I'm of this. I follow Judaism, I follow Lutheranism, I follow Protestantism. The body, as it says here, we weren't baptized in the name of Messianic. We weren't baptized in the name of Hebrew roots. We weren't baptized in the name of Catholic. We weren't baptized in the name of these religion. The body of Messiah is not divided. And we need to come back together. And the only way that we're going to come back together is if we can continue to sow seeds. And eventually, the time is going to come when the Father wants to draw us back. But we need to get the word out. And when the word gets out, these seeds can then be germinated. And then the end of this division, the sin of Jeroboam, the problem that Solomon brought in, and we can be brought into the greater promised land through the greater Joshua. So I thank you for that, and I encourage everyone to listen to that voice and to go do witnessing as the Ruach, the Holy Spirit, guides you. Thank you.
All right, questions?
I was trying to find on my app on the phone, but there's no internet. Where's Bethel located? Isn't that just to the east of Jerusalem?
Where it's,
I know Dan's.
it's in Ephraim, is where it is. Here, I'll pull it up here. It's mentioned in 1 Kings 12. I think he says it in verse 25. Well, it says he built Shechem in the hill country of Ephraim and lived and dwelt there. I believe Bethel is in Ephraim, if I'm not mistaken. I don't know where that is in relation to a direction of Jerusalem, but Samaria is to the north. Yeah. And if Samaria is to the north, then I would say that Bethel would likely be to the north as well.
Come on, that was some good stuff. You guys gotta have questions in here somewhere. True story. He is thorough.
All right, I guess no questions. We'll take a. Oh, we've got one more here.
So you said that there were two kingdoms now. So who are you identifying as two kingdoms?
Oh, the two golden calves, you mean? I don't think that they're kingdoms. I feel that they are, I think a golden calf can represent a religion and an Abrahamic faith that is based upon Torah. but twisted from it. And there's a lot of them that have been twisted from it. But if I were to go to the mothers of those, and they do have a centralized source and like a collective, I believe that the Dan and Ephraim would represent Roman. I'm not going to put it religion. I'll put it, Roman Catholicism and all of the daughters that sprung forth from that, which represent Beth El, and I believe that Islam would be represented by Dan. And in Babylon the Great chapter, it's a whole separate teaching. In Revelation 17:1, come, I shall show you the judgment of the great whore sitting on many waters. I shall show you the Dan of the great whore. And then in 18, I think 6, it talks about in her cup mixed for her double. Ephraim means doubly fruitful, but also contextually can also mean double ash heap. And we know Babylon the Great gets a double mixed for her double, and she becomes an ash heap. Dan and Bethel are in Babylon the Great, and the sin of Jeroboam is essentially kind of like the pinnacle of the analogy of the pattern, even though it happened before and after, of mixed worship that is there. I would say that the 2 golden calves of the 10-tribe kingdom would represent Roman Catholicism and her daughters, and then Islam and her daughters. Islam says in the Quran that Allah, Eloah, Elohim, Allah, Elohim, Elohim, by a different dialect of pronouncing it, gave Moses the Torah and gave Isa, Jesus, the gospel, and to look to that for truth. But then he gave Muhammad the new pattern. So they basically took what was established and then built upon that, and then created something new on top of it. Mormonism basically did the same thing as Islam. It's that same kind of pattern. So I don't believe it's a kingdom. I believe that the 2 golden calves represent a spiritual house of twisted religion from Torah. Yeah, and the 2-tribe kingdom did the same thing, when they were in Babylon as well. And I believe that the 3 together make up the collective of the coexist movement, with the C and the X and the T of the three Abrahamic faiths. But that's a whole separate point. But it is connected with the sin of Jeroboam, though. And twisting houses of worship are the main problem that is keeping the houses divided. Okay, I don't know.
No more questions? All right, let's take a short break while we get ready for our own Joseph Duran.
We'll close off here. Guard your heart, guard your soul, guard Torah, or pay the toll.